Welcome to the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. I am your host, Rob Gauthier the ET Whisperer. The Enlightenment Evolution Hour is a part of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. Any ideas or opinions expressed by myself, the guest, or a caller may not necessarily reflect the same opinions of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. Enlightenment defined. It's the state of giving and receiving greater knowledge and understanding about a certain subject or situation. Evolution defined. The gradual development of something, especially from a simple to a more complex form. So what then is Enlightenment Evolution? The state of giving and receiving greater knowledge as we develop from a simple to a more complex human being, living on Earth for our soul's experience. Welcome now and join us as we explore our Enlightenment Evolution Hour together. ET Whisperer, your host of the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. Welcome everyone. Today we have an amazing guest, special man, great channeler, author, dear friend. Many of you know him, Lee Harris from Lee Harris Energy. We are going to talk to him in just a few minutes, but before we do that, as always, we need to do a few quick announcements. First of all, next week we will have the one and only Kalina Angel, love of my life, beautiful sunshine, mother to my daughter, channeler extraordinaire, and all amazing human being. She will be here with us next week. The week after that, the one and only Michael Lee Hill, the UFO footage guy from the Great Lakes. Some amazing material throughout the years that he shared. After that, we have someone outside of our community who's working with the Xena Project, Gordon Goosenberry, an amazing dude, very interesting. Even though it won't be about metaphysics, it will be about great stuff. I'm sure just talking to him and getting to know about the project and himself as a person will be wonderful. After that, we've got Chris Matthew from the Forbidden Knowledge News Network. After that, we've got Faust Checho from Far Out with Faust podcast. After that, we will have Shelley Young, amazing friend, dear friend, channeler, amazing human being. She'll be here on the 26th. Ruben Langdon, another great friend, another great human being. We've got them all lined up with good friends and good human beings. And he'll be here on Wednesday, the 2nd November. And the Wednesday after that, Daniel Scranton, then Michaela Sheldon, and then the Atom Twister, a very unique person who is in our community, but I can almost guarantee you've never heard from him, as he's not a public speaker, but he has amazing insight and information to share. Then we have Ryder Lee, amazing podcast. He'll wrap up our November run, December. We still have some guests signed up. So that's where we're going to be at with the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. And just to let you know, the Enlightenment Evolution Hour is live every Wednesday, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific. Every week we're here. In special occasions like today, we do a pre-recorded show. Lee is an extremely busy guy. He runs several businesses. He works full-time, and right now on the precipice of his book release, he's super busy. So we had to do it outside of the time that we could do it together. So this one's a pre-recorded, but every week, with only one or two exceptions ever, we always do these live on the Wednesday nights at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 Pacific. So join us every week. If you want to know what our guest lists look like, you can always go to our Facebook page where we share all the guests that are coming. We also share this regularly on any of our social media accounts the day of, and sometimes a few days before. You'll know who the guest is, but if you tune here every Wednesday, you'll get to see with your own eyes who the guest is. That's it for the Enlightenment Evolution Hour, the Enlightenment Evolution Network. We've got several shows coming. We still haven't got that together yet, but once the other shows start coming, we will point you towards the network where we'll be uploading all the content from all our creators, amazing people who we have in talks right now. And as for the ET Whisperer, the channeling class on the 24th of September, this will be 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific. Come and learn how to channel. 3 hours, I take your questions that you need to know about channeling. I also give you techniques that I learned how to channel and that others have taught me when they learned to channel. So amazing thing, a lot of insight that you can gain from that. And we have our mailing list that just now gave 50% off all the digital archives for the ET Whisperer, Treb channeling, and the channel panel. And we also gave 20% off personal private sessions for the ET Whisperer. So if you want to be on the mailing list and want to get good deals every month, it's a monthly list for now. We might try to move it to bi-weekly or weekly when the opportunity is available. We will update on important updates in between those last weekend of each month. But all you have to do is go to etwhisper.com. The pop-up comes, sign up for the mailing list. Come check it out, join us, and keep updated with everything on the ET Whisperer, the Enlightenment Evolution Hour, and the channel panel. Alright guys, that's enough for announcements. I think it's time to bring in the man himself. Lee Harris is not only an amazing human being, but he's the author of Conversations with Z's, Book 1, and Energy Speaks. A gifted energy intuitive and channeler, he leads a vibrant online community that reaches hundreds of thousands of people every month. If you've been to his channel, you see the crazy amounts of subscribers and viewers that he has, and from my perspective, it's because he reaches the soul of the concepts. He's acclaimed online's event member community, the portal, Top 50 Spirituality Broadcast, Impact the World, and adventures in the deepest aspects of living, loving, and awakening. Lee covers everything, an amazing guy. He also is an accomplished music producer, singer-songwriter with acclaimed albums, and we have all of the links down below. We have the book that we're going to be talking about today in the links below. It just came out a couple days ago. His music has even gotten to #1 on the iTunes and Amazon's New Age charts. So this guy's all around talented, all around amazing. So I'm going to bring the man himself in now that you had your introduction. Welcome, Lee. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I appreciate it very, very much. It's great to talk to you again, brother.
It always puts a massive smile on my heart to know I'm going to talk to you. So thank you for having me, and thank you to all your listeners for being here.
Well, I appreciate it. Something that, I've talked about you through a couple different episodes of memories that I've had of you that were fond, or things I thought that were impactful for your work. And your work has been really important, but something that I always try to find an answer to for everyone who comes on to the show isn't so much about your story. I know your story. Everyone who's ever checked out your work knows your story. If anyone hasn't heard it, they can find it in probably every interview you've ever done. But I want to know what the influences that were in your life early on, the things that opened you up to the possibilities of receiving the things that happened in your journey that helped you go into this pathway, or that helped you go in. For example, one of my friends said they had a very profound experience that opened them up to the possibility of a bigger world, and then they went on, and then their story happened. For you, what were the influences in your life that really kind of opened the possibility for you to have a story?
It's a really good question, and it's funny, if I go back to my childhood, I was always a creator. So whether it was I was a fairly isolated child, even though I was social and I liked people and I liked friends, I also felt this massive sense of isolation in my childhood. And so creativity was my solace. And I would, for example, come home at the weekend and I would build a Lego town for 2 days, and I would have the whole town complete by the end of Sunday, like a big, big thing on the floor. Or I would turn my room into some kind of den, something different. So I was always into creating. And I think that was, in a way, the first place I felt open in the world, because I didn't have any spiritual influences as a child. Music and movies were very important to me. They were places that I felt the magic of feeling. And I felt like movies affected me in a big way because they put me into a different world, a different possibility. music was so important because of the way it made me feel inside and how certain songs gave voice to feelings. So they were kind of all I really had until I was 16 or 15 or 16 years old. And that was when I started to really hunger for actual spirituality or actual self-growth material. And I remember Oprah Winfrey, her show at the time, this is way before she did Super Soul Sunday. She used to have audience members talking about what they were going through in life and how they coped with it. And to me, I ate that up because I realized there was a disconnect for me in the fact that I was aware of feelings in people that they weren't talking about. And I was also aware of feelings inside me that I didn't know how to talk about. So in a way, she was the first kind of grounded opener for me when it came to understanding our human nature and the nature of the soul. And then at the age of 16, 17, I got into things like tarot readings, and they always felt like home to me. I was like, well, this feels like real. This feels, there are some people out there skeptically saying, well, that's not real. And I'm like, no, this feels way more real than a lot of the stuff that's going on in life to me. So like many, I'm sure, of your listeners, I then went through a whole bunch of the classic books like the Celestine Prophecy. And I was one of the people who went to the bookshop when the Four Agreements had only been out for 6 months. And I found it, fell in love with it, bought copies for friends. And of course, now it's always on the top 10 bestseller list, which I love seeing. And then, of course, Shirley MacLaine and Out on a Limb. And in tandem with that, I had a very important friend when I was 19 years old. And she was in her early 40s. She was running the film and music library at my university, where I would go all the time to borrow DVDs of like art house cinema that I was obsessed with, subtitled films that were hard to get. And I would go in, and eventually we became friends, and she would talk to me. And one day she just said to me, "You realize you're very intuitive." And I was like, what? I couldn't. She was very, very intuitive. She was psychic, and she saw me, and she understood who I was to become, but was not yet able to be. And so she mentored me on a very personal level. She taught me about synchronicity. She taught me about looking out for signs. And then, lo and behold, 3 years later, I'm somebody who goes to workshops all the time. Like my weekend, I would rush off to metaphysical workshops, self-growth workshops, and then boom, at the age of 23, I began channeling when I heard the voice of my guides, which I always tell people, I was not like a fan of channeling. I don't know what I thought about it, to be honest. I definitely didn't. I think it was mysterious to me. And then, as is the story for many people, it happened to me. And, once that happens, you can't really put the genie back in the bottle.
No, you cannot put the genie back in the bottle at all for that. And it's amazing to hear too that the art of music opened you up. I think that's a universal thing, and I know for you it still remains a hugely important thing. What was it about the music? What type of music did you lock into first that really kind of opened up the emotional, empathic, flowing part of you?
Well, I think when I was, this is a funny story, but I mean, maybe it isn't, but at the age of like 12, 11 or 12, I could probably sing every single word of the musicals, The Phantom of the Opera and Miss Saigon. Like I could sing I knew every word, I knew all the harmonies. So clearly the music mind in me, or the obsessive music nature in me that I now pour into creating music, that was how that was showing up at the time. I was consuming music that probably wasn't really for 11 or 12-year-olds, but for me, it was fascinating. And then I would say that the really influential music happened for me when I was probably like 15, 14, 15. I would obsessively listen to certain songs, and it was a lot of what was out there at the time. Like the first record I ever bought was Aha, Take on Me. I also remember having Madonna albums, but the breakthrough really came when I found people like Kate Bush, Tori Amos, and lots of other singer-songwriters who would find ways to use music. They would use their lyrics to help you understand the feelings that you were having, and that was a revelation to me. And that was the moment where I just fell in love with that kind of music. And the Z's have explained that they got to me first through music. And they explained this not that long ago, like a couple of years ago. At the age of 21, I all of a sudden started hearing music. As someone who had always sung like in theatre productions and loved music as a listener, but I never thought I would compose. I never thought that was in me. And at the age of 21, a light bulb went off. A friend taught me 3 chords on the guitar, and I sat down, and all of a sudden this song happened, and I wrote it down. And so at that age of 21, music became a channel for me and in me. And then it was about 18 months later that I first heard the Z's, and they later explained, we got to you first through music.
That's actually fascinating. I've not heard that about your story before. I know music is such an important part of your life, but I also know you express a channeled sense through that music, because the music that I've listened to from you has always been right at the heart, right at the soul. You feel the vibration of it when you listen to it, and it's very good music. I'm kind of a fan of all types of music, but the music that always hits me hardest is the ones that tell stories or that take you through a personal experience. And I find that you've done that really well through that experience, and sharing the energy of that moment through the words and the actual songs themselves. Um, I remember on one of your episodes, I believe it was one of your very first episodes of the podcast that you do. You brought in, and I cannot remember his name, but the guy who helps you with your music. What was his name again?
Yeah, Davor. So Davor Bozic, yeah.
Yeah, he was actually really famous in the country that he lived in, wasn't he?
Yeah, so Davor is from Slovenia. He's a few years older than I am, but fascinatingly, when he was a teenager, he was kind of like the equivalent of a Ricky Martin. He was like a teenage pop star, and and he still is known in Slovenia because he had a television show for 17 years. And he and I met in 2012. I was at a channeling conference in Vienna. I'd been booked as a guest speaker for a group called the Crimson Circle that Davor also knew. And it's so weird. We met on stage. I was literally about to walk on to do my talk and then a channel. And the organizer introduced me to Davor, and they said, "Oh, this is Davor. He's playing like percussion and chimes, and would you like some accompaniment?" And I went, yeah, why not during my channeling part? And Davor went, okay. So that was it. Like I walked on stage, never met him before. He then accompanies me through the channel, and flash forward 10 years later. And not only has Davor been the one to not only audio engineer all my channeling, but compose original music underneath it. Because very quickly after, I asked him if he would be interested in working with me. So yeah, we have a long history. And then because he is from the music industry in Slovenia, and I had several albums, before I met him, we, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, we've been really going for it with creating our recorded music and putting it out into the world, because we did a lot of in the room healing songs when we were doing live workshops. And because of COVID, we were able to, I guess, slow down as many people did. And we weren't going and doing live workshops anymore. So we had a bit more time. So we said, let's try and put these on record. So he's very integrated with both the Z's and also the music. And Davor himself is very intuitive, and we have a very psychic connection, he and I. So it's been a beautiful friendship and working relationship.
Yeah, that's the reason I brought it up, because when I hear your music and I heard the interview, I was like, oh, that's a part of the music in the background. It's so beautiful and amazing. It's a very strong feeling. And hearing you guys talk, you could tell that there was a friendship there, that you guys have known each other. It seems like the souls, you can tell when two souls know each other longer than just the life that they're in. So it's a beautiful thing, the music release and sharing that. Um, I want to go back to something that you had said, because this has been a common thing with many guests. So I want to see where you weigh in here. You said you'd go through a lot of books and a lot of channeling and a lot of events and things of that nature. Did you ever bump into the Jane Roberts material?
No, you know what's so funny for me is I'm a very uneducated channeler, which I think is helpful. I was with a partner for a few years who was also channeling. This is back in the 2000s. And he was the one who would expose me to other channelers. And he would say, have you heard Jane Roberts? Have you read this book? He was the one who introduced me to Esther Hicks. And when I heard Esther, that was the most, like, I remember thinking, oh, this is the closest vibration to disease that I've ever heard. And again, different but close. So no, I'd heard of the books, but again, I wasn't really focused on channeling. To me, channeling was just an aspect of the metaphysical and self-growth world. And I was taken to see one channeler before I channeled myself. And yeah, even when I went to see him, I remember thinking, oh, why has he got to close his eyes and have a slightly strange voice? And, of course, now I have egg on my face for thinking that. Um, but yeah, so no, I was very uneducated around channeling. And still to this day, I don't know if I've ever read a channeled book. I don't know if I've read pieces of a couple of things. Yeah, but never, I don't think I've ever sat and read a channeled book cover to cover.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because a lot of the channelers I meet are either very into other channeling or not at all. And
Yes,
I
I've met
fall.
that same thing. I've met a whole bunch who are really into it and they can quote. I'm like, oh wow, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
It is, and I was one of those people who really didn't do much with other channeling. Like when I first started channeling, I had not heard about it, so I had to use a reference of understanding what was going on with me and if it was normal and those things. But it wasn't until I'd been channeling for almost 6 or 7 years publicly before I knew who Esther Hicks was. So it
Yeah,
was, and
same.
Kalina, yeah, introduced. That's crazy. Um, so all of these experiences, your music, your openness as a child to go through music and theater and movies, all of this brings you to the channeling. And let's suppose our listeners know about your channeling, and if they don't, you can go back and listen to the first interview that I did with Lee back in 2015 or 14 maybe. um, let's go to this now. Right now, I would say you are probably one of the more resonant channelers with myself, and I don't listen to channelings, but when I hear your monthly reviews, which I know is not a channeled message, but it has aspects of it, like we had talked about before, where you're connecting to that higher aspects of yourself.
Yes, and
Or
actually, I will say the headlines for my energy updates come from the Z's. So I sit down and I channel like the 7 or 8 headlines for the month, and then I intuitively riff on those.
yeah, it's amazing how you did that too, because I always felt, because there's something that you do when you channel the Z's. It's an energy thing. It's every channeler has one of those things that's different for each of them. But there's a certain noise that's made, like that. And
Yes, they say
I,
ha ha. Yeah,
ha, yeah, that's it. And I noticed a couple times while you were doing the energy things, there was a super light version of that underneath. I was like, holy moly, so I figured that coming from the same place of flow. Um, but when I listen to your channeling, I don't hear things that don't resonate with me. I always hear things that are meant to teach and empower, and those are kind of my own rule of thumbs for channeling that I would resonate with or like. Um, and then sometimes I hear other channeling that I don't resonate with, and it's usually to do with things that divisive or fear-based or things that connect in that way. But with that energy, with Aziz bringing that to you and sharing that type of idea with you, hey, you're connected. Hey, you're empowered. Hey, all these good things. Did that influence the way your life was headed? I know you had that aspects of the spiritual material already, but did that strengthen or bond that type of energy to you even better?
Oh God, absolutely, Rob. I think, it's interesting because someone asked Stephen a question about does he, and this was because we were doing a work thing yesterday. We were doing a video where we were both answering questions about our relationship for the Portal community. I do these video diaries just for the Portal members, and I invited him in on one, and somebody had said, Stephen, do you have a connection with the Z's? And I mean, he said a few different things, and then he said, but I'm also with Lee, and to me, Lee and the Z's are not that far apart. And I know what he means. Rob, you'll relate to this because obviously you have Treb, and I don't see the world the way the Z's do, for sure. I mean, there's no way I see the world from their vantage point or
Right.
their understanding. And there are things that they will say every time I channel, even if they don't surprise me as a concept, the way they explain it might help my understanding deepen around what they're saying when I hear it. However, of course, having now especially channeled publicly for 18 years, because that means you're channeling a lot more than you would if you were just doing it personally for yourself. It does change you. It does influence your vibration. And yet, what I appreciate about the Z's and why I keep channeling them is because I sometimes find with some channelers I've heard, they're very much, how do I put this? Some channelers I've heard are very much love and light, everything's fine. And while I understand from their perspective that might be true, to me that discounts the human experience. And what I like about the Z's is they will say, and I'm sure you get this with Treb, and they'll say, it's not easy being a human being right now. They'll say, there are some wonderful things. Consciousness has never been higher. But we do see some of the struggles that you're going through and some of the things that you have to evolve. So for me, I think there is definitely the Z's viewpoint has elevated and expanded my own ability to experience the world. And over time, and as I go through each new learning I have to go through as a human, and each new challenge or epiphany or revelation, I get more unified with their way of thinking the more time goes on, but never to the point that I feel like an alien when I'm out in the world. Ironically, I used to feel more like an alien human being until the more I channeled, the more it helped me bridge the two. The Z's said to me once, you, like many on the planet, walk a difficult line between the sky and the ground. And it was weird, even them just giving a name to that, it liberated me. It stopped me separating the two. It made me go, oh, of course, they're basically saying you have a foot in both worlds. You have a foot in the world of spirit and a foot in the world of the human. And if you think about it, really, that's probably the birthright of most of us. But that's not how we've been programmed, or it's not the way our society invites us to experience ourselves or this world. So I definitely could say I'm vibrationally in the best place I've ever been in my life. And to me, that's just the steady chipping away, the steady, I guess, chipping away at some of my more rigid ideas as a human, and including their viewpoint of the fact that we're having this massively vast experience while we're a human being, even if the human world doesn't necessarily invite us to see how vast we are.
That's beautiful. It's actually very meaningful. And this is another draw to me to enjoy the channeling when I hear your channeling. And no judgment against other channelers, but a lot of channelers in our community aren't grounded. They're more ethereal, and that's great, because that gives them an opportunity to have that experience. I'm not taking away anything, but for me, being grounded in the earth energy and being able to make that bridge to the etherical energy, that's usually where more full-bodied channeling comes out, and that's where it connects. In my own opinion, it brings the elements of those things that are real on the earth, the struggles, the pain, the horrors that we face as humans, both internally and what we see projected externally in the world to us, but also that sense of energy behind the knowing of how powerful we are as souls, and how creators, and how we're extremely connected to that aspect of love and light and all of those other beautiful things. So I've always really appreciated that about you as a person, because your channeling really can't come through you in the way it does, as beautifully and elegant as it does, unless you have that. But also the Z's bring that energy in, and because of you, embody that as a beautiful mark too. So I always really appreciated that. Have they talked to you on, I know they have, what have they said to you about how things have been so shaky for the last couple of years? Because we've all seen our community go a little crazy, anger flaring, frustration. This is something me and you have talked about. This is something I've talked with my community about. You've talked with your community about. What are they saying to kind of help people understand what's happening there?
You know, it's interesting. They talk about our fighting with each other, or with, one group fighting another group. They talk about that as war energy. And they basically say, we are inhabiting war energy when we want to annihilate or aggressively reject another person because of our opinions. I think when some people hear that, they get defensive and they go, well, I need to defend my boundaries. And I'm like, yeah, there's a big difference between knowing your boundaries and wanting to whack someone else round the face because they said something that you didn't like. And, I'm always struck by when you see people, let's say on social media, writing very aggressive things to other people through comments. Like, to me, that's no different to punching someone in the face. Yes, you're not physically hurting somebody, but your intent is to attack, belittle, or intimidate. Now, don't get me wrong, I've had my buttons pushed, like everybody. There are times when I can feel parts of me wanting to defend. And I think what was so interesting about what we went through since March 2020 is it really raised the shadows in the world for everyone to see. Whether you were looking at the shadows in some of our systems, whether you were looking at the shadows in your relatives and your friends, and all of a sudden one friend won't speak to you because your ideology is different to theirs. I mean, that's painful. And I know many people who went through very painful grief periods because of that. But you also have to look at that and go, okay, well, if they will discount me or write me off because because one part of me has a different opinion to one part of them, if their identity is so wrapped up in that opinion and I actually can hold space for other truths, then no, we shouldn't be friends. We can respect each other, we can wish each other well, but we shouldn't be vibrationally trying to connect every day. So it's complex to talk about this, because if we were speaking about someone's specific falling out with their aunt, let's say, yeah, you can't just boil it down to, oh, well, they weren't vibrationally supposed to be together. There's going to be grief, and there's going to be family dynamics, and there's going to be a lot of human stuff involved in that. But if we just zoom out a little bit and see it the way that the Z's would talk about it, or the perspective the Z's would ask us to include in our process, because they never want you to deny your human feelings or your human experience. They say that's so important. But they would also say, zoom out and see where seeds of division have been sown. And for me, I look at the way that certain things were reported in our media. I mean, a lot of blame has gone to algorithms and technology, but I read many, many immature articles where people weren't being given information. They were being told what to think, and they were being told to be anti another group in subtle ways or overt ways. Now, that's not a world I want to live in, because that's not a good world. That's a world that's heading towards a lower consciousness state that is enforced. So I found it very interesting, because the Z's said the shadow that has always been in your conditioning and in your systems is now rising to the surface. And they said it's going to be very messy. They said it's going to be a difficult few years. They were saying since about 2014 that 2017 to 2024 were going to be tough years on the planet. They didn't just use the word tough, because generally we hear the word tough and we just think it's bad. We just go, oh my God, that doesn't sound good. But they said it was going to be a massive time of change. And I think people don't know what to believe anymore or who to believe. And even though in the moment of that happening, it can be very alarming and it can destabilize us, or it can make us think, oh my God, I don't know where the ground is anymore. If we are wise, and if we really use a period of time like that, we will rebirth ourselves. And I've met some people who get very worried about other people. They'll say, oh, well, this group are really worrying me, and da da da. And the Z's would say to them, by all means, keep your eye on that group. And if you're really worried about them, either try and help that group see something different, or do what you can to make sure that that group doesn't take down the rest of the world. But if you aren't willing to take any action steps towards either of those things, or it doesn't feel like that's wanted or safe, then focus on yourself and the people with whom you can generate connection energy and positive energy. And I do think that I met some people who got very seduced, understandably, because there was a lot out there to attract our attention to doom and gloom. All of us were seduced by it at one moment or another. A lot of people got into this, oh my God, we're doomed. The world is doomed. This is terrible. This is going to all go the wrong way. And of course, if enough people start thinking that, what's going to happen? So even though there were some very alarming times for me during the whole process, I feel grateful I had the purpose of my work. I feel grateful I had the perspective of the Z's, who would always somehow expand my experience of what I was going through. And they would talk about the bigger picture at work. And they would say, division is being sown among people. It's not just happening randomly. Division is being created, energized, and fueled by certain groups. They said, and you have to be very mindful of that. They said it might feel temporarily good to have decided that you are superior to your Aunt Jemima, and that you must ostracize her from your life because she's the devil incarnate, or whatever you're thinking about her. But that's a temporary fix. And actually, Aunt Jemima is, for whatever reason, scared or believing something. They were basically saying, be careful about how division will be used to disempower you as a group at a time where you need to be a group together as much as possible. And I think when I repeat a sentence like that, I understand that for a human being listening to that, we go, well, hang on, the world's really not a together place. But what they're saying is, notice how the emotional responses that were flying around the world, how those flames were fanned. One of the things that I noticed was how stories kept changing, and media narratives kept changing. And I'm not telling anybody what to think about what was going on, but I did notice that media stories kept changing, and people only noticed if the story changed in a way that didn't suit them. And they clung on to stories that were a year old that had since been disproved in several areas. So I feel like people's fear of death came up really strong. And if you live with spiritual awareness, you live with the fact that we are all going to die. All of us. This body is going to go, this life is going to go. And that doesn't mean we can't be afraid of death, or it doesn't mean we can't have a moment where we're like, oh, I don't want to die yet. I wish I had another 10 years. But what I noticed was people's base responses were targeted. And there was all of this horror talk about death, and it was pumped out into the world. And for me, this last 2.5 years have been a moment where, if you're really paying attention to what's going on, the veil just got lifted on certain mechanics that perhaps up until then, the majority of people weren't needing to see. And the Z's have said it doesn't take the whole population to see it. They said it really only takes about 25 to 30% of people to be aware that something's going on that isn't that good for people. They said that's enough of a tipping point to cause a change. So that was a very long answer, Rob. I'm sorry, but yeah, that's kind of some of the stuff that comes to me in response.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's very much in alignment with the same things Treb, Aridif, and other beings I've connected with have shared. You mentioned the levels of fear and the fear of death specifically, and I realized too, another thing that a lot of people feared was freedom. And freedom, death takes away the ultimate freedom of living in a life. But that was another big one too that a lot of people were triggered with, and between those two, it encompassed almost everybody. Like literally almost everyone. I met few people who didn't care, but these people weren't really caring about those things anyway, because they'd either found that freedom inside of themselves, or just weren't really connected to thinking about the things outside of their experience. So yeah, and it's amazing. You're the only channeler I had heard who also channeled something about the 2021 era. Treb and Art have talked about 2012 and that being a cycle, 9 years before, 9 years after, and how it kind of spills out into this area, and it's an end of one cycle and the start of a new cycle. And you're the only other channel I had heard about that. So a lot of things that you shared were confirming. You gave credit to the Z's for sharing a lot of stuff, but your own intuition and insight, as a person who's gotten to know you over the years, and a person who's gotten to see your work. Kalina loves it, and I watch it whenever she's watching it. I also see your own intuition, your own natural leadership, your charisma. I always tell everyone, your ability to speak and to demand the attention of others, not as a forceful demand, but a demand of respect. People want to hear what you say because they feel your heart in it. It's always been a big thing. And Kalina was watching this course just a few months ago that you had done because she joined your portal, and it was called Own Your Value. And I'll tell you, this was something that was big because a lot of people in our community have been looking through the concepts of starting spiritual businesses. We got more people channeling, more people getting into the metaphysical aspects, teaching health, teaching all of these older arts like tarot. So this is something that helped us learn a lot of things. And even though the Z's were present of the energy and in the sharing and stuff, you had a lot of things to share, and you brought in guests that shared about that. Can you tell us a little bit about, kind of what your inspiration for that was? Was it because you heard the same people asking about these types of things, like, hey, I want to create abundance, and how do I do that?
Oh, thanks for bringing that up, Rob. It's funny. It took me a while to realize this, but it was actually Stephen, my husband, who pointed this out. He said, whenever we are at the dinner table and we're with friends and they start to pick your brain on the business side of what they're doing, he said, you light up. Because it's true. It's funny. You might relate to this. I think when you do a job that has a public component like we do, Most people will think of me as, oh, that's the energy update guy, or that's the guy who channels disease, or that's the guy whose music I listen to. But actually, probably I spend as much or more time behind the scenes, which I think is true for most people. I think and the truth is, I was not trained in business. I did not get a business degree. And as things grew around my own work, I had to learn a lot. But I will say I always had a passion for it. And I was very fortunate, because I was very, very fortunate, I think, that things took off for me very quickly. That might not have been my story, but I think because they did, and because, after 2 years of doing readings part-time, I couldn't keep up with demand and keep my day job. So I went full-time. So I've been doing this for 16 years. And I now have a team of, I want to say, is it 17 or 18? Yeah, 17 or 18 people, because I have my company, Lee Harris Energy, Golden World Music, and I also, lead the company for Stephen Washington Experience. So what I wanted to do was, several years ago, the Z's kept saying, and I think, Rob, this happened at your channel panel, which you graciously invited me to be one of the speakers and channelers at, I think it was in LA. They kept saying over and over again for like 2 years, you are needed and now is your time. You are needed and now is your time. That kept coming out. And so I wanted to create some kind of course that would give somebody who didn't quite know where to start, but knew they had a skill, knew they had a talent, knew they had a passion for healing, or being intuitive, or being a channeler, or whatever it was, that would both show you some of the ways that you could reach an audience and scale your work, like find different ways to bring your work to the world, but also focus on mindset. Because I think one of our biggest challenges, those of us that do this work, man, it's, you go through a lot. You go through your own limited ways of thinking. You push up against money issues. One of the things I noticed for myself was, every time I raised my prices on my sessions, it would process the hell out of me for a few days. Like, I would know I needed to do it. I would know, okay, it's time to go from $60 to $100. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to go up $40. But I did it because I had such a big waiting list. I wanted to create more audio. I needed help. I needed to be able to pay people, because I couldn't do it all myself. So I thought, okay, well, if I increase my rate, then I can afford to hire someone to help me with the customer service. So to me, there was a logic to business. And so I wanted to both impart some of what I had learned, but also help people look at, where does it come from when we're nervous to raise our rates? Is it because spirituality and money have often been weaponized against one another? I mean, the classic thing that you'll see out there, and to me, it's a very lazy criticism that you'll see on social media. It's when someone will post underneath one of your videos, they'll go, oh, they're just trying to make money out of this. And I always think that's such a silly, it's just not a clever thing to say. Because if someone really wants to make money, they should go into investment banking, or they should go into, like, if money had been my primary goal, I would have gone into some kind of finance business that probably would not have served my soul. But I know many people who are quite wealthy who went into what I would call money industries, who then had to kind of figure out how to get happy once they were rich. So yeah, it's a lazy argument, and it goes back to trying to persecute healers. But there are other sides of it, which is like, what are your family's beliefs around healing? What are your family's beliefs around income? So Own Your Value is like it helps you look at what might be getting in your way. And it also offers you ways to look at things. So It's great because I'm rerunning the course right now for the month of September, and I'll be doing a live Q&A on October the 3rd, I believe. This is probably the last year I will run the course in this form. I'll probably rebirth it in a year or so, but I really, really love hearing what you just said, because honestly, it lights me up to think of more people doing what they want to do in the world in an unobstructed way. It's good for the individual and it's good for the world. So it's kind of one of my secret joys. It's a secret because the people who are in my audience who don't want to do this, they'll never look at anything I do around entrepreneur training. But I love it because for me, the growth I've experienced as a person through being able to grow through my work has been immense. And so, yeah, anybody that I can help with a breadcrumb of information or a light bulb moment, that thrills me.
Well, I imagine that moment with the Z's at the channel panel was when we were backstage. I was telling you, hey, things are starting to get real busy for us. We need to grow this out. You're doing great. You're doing well. You're very successful. Do you have any advice? And you talked to me and Kalina for about a half hour backstage and shared some insight that did help us. And after watching your course, I had been considering shifting all of my stuff around. And that's why I'm able to do this show every week now, because I cleared up room to do it. So it's something that's natural to you, you're good at, and having that, all of those lists of wonderful things that I said about you earlier, having that to share that through the lens, it makes it perfect. We enjoyed the course, so I'm glad you're still running it, because it was only a couple months ago, I think, when Kalina had seen it in the portal. So that's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The experiences that you've had with the success, the experience that you've had in your ability to reach all these people's lives, because you've got tons of subscribers on YouTube, you get tons of views on your energy updates every month, tons of people at the portal. People come to you because what you do is good and soul fulfilling. But taking all that energy and creating with it, I know that you've had an opportunity to do a lot of different things. One of the projects I know that you're working on right now is getting ready to release this book. Actually, it released 2 days ago on the 12th of September, correct?
Yes, the new book, Conversations with the Z's.
Yes, and this book is an amazing book, and it goes through a lot of the energy. The first book that you did was like a prelude. It was an energy of sharing. It was called Energy Speaks. That was your first book, correct?
Yeah, that came out in March of 2019, and that was a compilation of all of the different channeled messages from the Z's over the years on a wide range of topics, such as sex and sexuality, abundance, the power of dreams. So it was kind of if you like, a kind of greatest hits of the Z's up until that point in book form. And the format for Conversations with the Z's, it was an accident. I wasn't planning on doing another channeled book. In fact, I wouldn't have thought I would have done another channeled book. I was thinking, one day I'll have to sit down and write. A few people have asked me to write the book for entrepreneurs in the spiritual field, and that appeals. But it was a strange coincidence because I have, a friend, Diana Edwards, who did the book with me. She's a psychotherapist, and she's also a spiritual old soul. Like, she's read all the books, she's read lots of channeled material. She's very, very well educated when it comes to spiritual material. And I asked Diana if she would record a series of conversations with me for the portal members. I said, would you interview the Z's on various topics? The reason I did this, in our friendship, we had done this a few times, and it had been fantastic. Like, what came through and the kinds of questions Diana asked, and the rapport between the Z's and Diana was really strong. So she said yes. We thought we were doing, I don't know, 3 or 4 recordings for the portal. And after the first day of recording, the power of it And what came through was so interesting that night I was in the little guest house where we were recording, and I just got this lightning bolt moment of, this can be a book, and this will be a series of books. And then I told Diana the next day, and she actually asked the Z's when we were in channel mode, and they said, oh yeah, this will be a whole series of books. We just weren't going to tell you in advance, but there's at least 8. And we were both like, oh my God, you know? So yeah, book 1 just came out 2 days ago. Book 2 will come out in spring of 2023. And we are just about to start work on book 3, which will come out in January of 2024.
It's beautiful how these things come together. And I do know exactly what you're talking about. There are always people who have either familiarized themselves with the channeled beings who you work with. Kalina, my friend William's another guy who helps us with our Patreon. And they can speak to Treb and Aridif and bring out the best in them each time because they know them. They know what they've already shared. They know what they haven't shared. And also they have that energetic connection too. So bringing someone in that already had that experience to do this and creating is definitely not incidental by any means. I know a lot of people in our community say, well, maybe it was a good idea at the time for the Z's to say, yeah, we want to do a series. But these things really do have a divine way of being connected in ways that we always see as crazy, weird incidents. And the synchronicity levels behind them are amazing. So the series of 8 books, that's huge. That's going to be huge.
Well, yeah, and can I just add the caveat that we're committed to 3 right now, and I reserve the right as a human creator for things to change. But I will say that it's delightful to do this with Diana, and I do find it fascinating what comes through because it is different. So I fully understand what you were saying about Kalina and your crew. It does something different for them to be in dialogue, and what we've experienced is it's grounding. There's something. It's not that the Z's can't give you grounded information when they, shall we say, monologue, which is what they normally do. But when it's a back and forth conversation, something different happens, especially when the questioner is so attuned.
Absolutely. And when you go through this attunement, the friendship connection, it brings forth the best stuff. What is your favorite part of the first book that you did, your personal favorite that you learned the most from?
In Energy Speaks, or you mean Conversations with the Z's?
The Conversation with the Z's, the newest book.
Yeah, I will say they speak, because the Z's have often said over the years, we are a collective of 88 beings who then extend wider into source. And the way they describe themselves is they say, some of us have been incarnate at other times on Earth and in other places, but they say we are more of a consciousness library, meaning they can also channel. So it's so funny because I think often we're most familiar with channeled beings who are one thing. Not all channelers channel one thing, but I would say that's the dominant experience at this time. I'm channeling Archangel Michael, or I'm channeling, Bashar or Treb or Abraham, which Abraham is a group, I believe. But what's interesting with the Z's is they explain that they're like a consciousness library and a voice of galactic source. So they say they are able to connect to, in a way, that universal wisdom. So it's a little less defined personality-wise, but I learned things about them and about their relationship to me and the connection that some of them have to Sirius. There were certain things that were disclosed that interested me on a personal level, things I'd never heard in 20 years of channeling them, because there were things I probably never thought to ask. Actually, I've been channeling them personally since 1998, 99. So yeah, it's been longer than that. And then things they were saying about the world that were so interesting to me, because when I view what's going on in the world through their lens and I monitor it, over a period of 6, 12, 18 months, I see the purpose to it all in a way that I couldn't if I just looked at it through my human eyes and through the stories that are told on Earth about what's going on right now. But because I have the benefit of channeling them for so many years and hearing so many different timelines and conversations with them about what's going on the planet, I always find it very reassuring. And I think in this book, a friend who's also an author, Scott Stabile, he reflected to me the other day that he found the book incredibly reassuring and peaceful, and it made him feel more comfortable with being alive on the planet at this time. He said, and I felt all of that, not because it was just wrapping me in a blanket and telling me not to worry about anything. So because they really do talk about things and go there. But he said the fact that they go there also makes him believe the wider perspective that they impart even more than if they were just saying, oh, ignore all the bad stuff. It's not real. Don't worry about it. Just love and light your way through it. He said it's that combination that helped him feel more peaceful. So, as the channeler, you're always like, I'm the worst person to ask as the as the channeler. Like, I don't fully understand what it's like for someone else to experience disease. I'll be the only person who'll never really know, because for me, they come through me. And so I have a very direct experience of them that leaves me less objective than others. So I rely on the reactions and responses of other people to get my barometer on how effective it is. So I think overall, what I'm most pleased about with book one and the people who've read it or heard the audio so far is that it's helping people find a more empowered way to live in these times and a wider perspective as we navigate it, which for me personally is very important. Otherwise, I think I would, some days if you just looked at what was going on and only read the news, you wouldn't want to get out of bed.
No, you wouldn't. It would be a horrific thing, and there is a testament to seeing the experience of all of us as we're going through these times and these shifts. You said something too that was very, very profound to me as a channeler, and I don't know how well that experience kind of translates, but having that direct connection and that direct communication coming through your body, whether you're conscious channel or not, there's always the translation that comes direct. So you perceive it, I feel, in the most direct way that they're sharing, because interpretation is something that everyone will do differently. I've heard 5 people listen to one video that I release, and they all have 5 different opinions on what's being said
That's
there.
so true.
But I feel like I know exactly what Trevor Aridif might be talking about when they're sharing, and when I share and say this is what they mean, and someone else asks, hey, what did you mean there? And they share, it's almost the same. So I'm like, yeah, I get it. That reflection that you have from other people is something that helps you understand too the impact. And a lot of synchronicities have happened to me to see that in play. I didn't get a chance to read the entire book just because with the kids it's been a little crazy, but I did find the Z speaking about role modeling and the importance in that and the energy behind that, the power of it. Can you share a little bit about your own interpretation? Because like I said, I've got an interpretation as an outside reader, but what do you feel that they're trying to share that the power of the role modeling was?
Yeah, I really, if I remember correctly, Diana really brings that in too through her question, and she was really talking about the power of when we are role modeled to versus told something. So, for example, I will say that I guess, yeah, let me put it this way. When you were asking me about my earlier life, and I said to you that for the first 15 years of my life, I was experiencing a dysmorphic sense of the world. I would have a sense of the feelings in a room or the feelings in a person. And it would be very confusing to me when a person who was clearly quite sad when asked how they were, would say, "Oh yes, I'm fine, thanks, everything's good." And I'd be thinking, but that isn't the verbal truth of your state. And when I was talking about what we witnessed since March 2020, we saw a lot of people using words that they were not aligned with. We saw a lot of public figures using words that, if you really know how to read energy and pay attention, they were not aligned. They were not speaking their truth. They may have been speaking a truth someone else had told them to say. And when you get that level of disconnection and lack of true alignment at the top, it will start to create a dysmorphic field in people. They will start saying, "Oh, well, they said this." And like you said, someone else will decide what they heard based on their feelings and based on how their feelings tell them to respond to those words. You said, I've had that experience too. I've sometimes seen people go, "I can't believe the Z said this. That's really, oh my God, this is something we should be worried about." And I was thinking, wow, I didn't think that was worrying at all. And then someone else will respond to that person and they'll go, "Oh, I didn't take it that way." So I think because we are a society that being in alignment is not something that we have been taught, or that we have been taught to value or see as a very important thing. You know, being able to speak your truth, being able to feel your truth, not needing to annihilate someone else because their truth differs to yours, just being able to be in the room and go, "Okay, I see it very differently, but okay." That level of alignment to me is the role modeling piece. So I've met many people who know a lot of spiritual information, and I wouldn't want to stay in a room with them for too long.
Yeah.
And I've met other people who have no interest in spiritual information, and I could spend 3 months with them because they're very aligned in their heart. They're very aligned in their, shall we say, goodness. And I'm not saying that people with lots of spiritual information aren't that too, but I've met some people who will behave in a spiritually superior way because of what they think they know or what they can say, but their actions and the way they behave to others is completely out of alignment with values of oneness and inclusivity. And so for me, the piece about role modeling is a beautiful reminder that our essence is communicating so much all of the time. And we as a society have to get really good at knowing who we are and what our integrity is and what our personal values are, and being open for other people to also become more who they are without needing to belittle or fight with them because they see something differently. Or to me, whenever you see that going on, you know that someone has left some part of themselves behind. And a good friend of mine educated me so beautifully 7 years ago. We had a bit of a fight and it came out of nowhere. I was very shocked. She was very upset at me for something, and she was very angry and kind of, tore a piece out of me one day. And this was a friend I really loved and still do. But it was a shock to me, and it definitely triggered some past stuff for me. It definitely raised a wound in me of, am I safe? Can I let go of this attack? And it wasn't good, and it wasn't good between us for many months. And it got to the point where, because she was holding her position as to why she was right and I was wrong, and I'd apologized many times, but it wasn't good. And it got to the point where I just said, I have to take a break from our friendship. I'm sorry, I wouldn't be being fair to myself if at this point I carried on taking this from you. And again, I apologize, but this is just too much. And at that moment, she broke. And to her credit, she said, "Please, can we FaceTime?" I was nervous, but I did. And she said to me, this is still one of the most powerful teachings of my life that she ever gave me. She said, Lee, I'm sorry. I left my heart. She said, I got angry.
Wow.
I got upset and I left my heart. Please forgive me. And in that moment, I mean, of course, I was like, oh God, I said, of course. I said, and I'm so sorry that I upset you. And because, my whole point was I wasn't trying to upset her. I wasn't deliberately, I was really horrified I'd upset her or let her down in the way that she didn't want to be let down by me. It was just a blind spot for me. But I couldn't be aggressively punished for that for months. And her saying I left my heart is something that I have carried with me and I've applied to myself. So if I get myself up in my ego about something, or I notice I'm a bit more emotionally inflamed when I'm thinking about a situation or a scenario or a person, I kind of go, Lee, you've left your heart. Come back to your heart. Bring your heart back into the picture. Doesn't mean you have to spend time with people who've abused you, and it doesn't mean you don't speak truth. But you don't want to speak truth without your heart involved. So again, sorry, Rob, I've kind of gone off on a tangent, but that's kind of where we ended up.
No, it's powerful. It's extremely powerful. I felt for the last couple of years, I felt myself leaving my heart more than I have before that because of the state of seeing people, the way that they've interacted, my own personal traumas with people. So yeah, that's very
We all
powerful.
have, by the way, like, when the guys who run FLFE, Clayton Stedman and Jeff Stegman, who I've had on my podcast a couple of times, they measure energy. And they said that the vibration of fear in March and April of 2020 was higher than they had ever seen it in our lifetime, than it had ever been read. And the problem is, when fear is high, people lose grounding, lose rationality, unprocessed wounds, emotions, trauma can suddenly go into that pot. So whenever you see anybody lashing out at someone, or if you yourself lash out at someone, it's a really good moment to go, oh, what was that about? Where was am I 13 years old right now? Am I 25 years old right now? Is this the way I wish I could have lashed out at that bully and it's rising from me? What's going on? Because this isn't a place of balance. And again, you can be balanced and be boundaried. You can say, no, I don't want to continue this conversation because I'm not feeling great in this conversation. So can we just revisit this tomorrow? I don't want to get overly emotional and perhaps irrational. I'd like to just reflect on what we're talking about. I can feel there's something I need to deepen with. And any true friend, any true balanced person, even if they don't like it, even if they want the conversation to carry on, if they have enough respect for you and your process and they're including you, they'll go, okay, Rob, yeah, sure, we can talk about it tomorrow. I would love to talk about it now, but okay, I understand you're giving me a no. I'm going to respect your no. Anybody who really loves you and isn't loving you in a conditional way or in a way that is feeding some need of theirs at your expense, they'll give you that space. And anybody who won't give you that space, unfortunately, in that moment, whether it's because of their trauma or whatever, they're caring more about how they feel than how you feel. And that's tricky because that's not actually a cohesive, balanced, compassionate relationship. So we've
Yeah.
all found ourselves in those moments. We're all human and we've all had our wounds and been wounded and we've wounded others. But I think I didn't mean to interrupt you, but when you said you felt that, I don't know anybody who didn't in the last 2 years. And I think the gift of it is a lot of us got to heal and got to look at our trauma in a different way. And the shadow side of it was a heartbreaking time in terms of the emotional reactions that were flying around.
And it doesn't feel good when you're used to trying to be in your heart, when you diligently work at being in your heart as frequently as possible. and then all of a sudden you find yourself out of it more and more than you're ever used to be. It's a bit terrifying, you know. It's like, oh my God, is this why when people get past 40, you know, they get grumpy all the time? You know, it's like, oh God, am I going to do like my grandparents did? There was some of that processing too, you know. It's like, I don't want to do that. It's very powerful to stay in your heart. I know that we're almost out of time. I know you've got other things to do. So before we get everybody educated with how to find you and all that stuff, I want to play a quick game, just about 4 or 5 quick questions. Questions that you may have never been asked before, questions about you outside of your work and outside of your life, questions that probably have very little meaning, but it's fun anyway, right?
Love it. Great, let's do it.
All right, favorite color. That's always the first one. What's your
Purple.
favorite color? Purple. Same. You're the only person who's had the
Ah.
same favorite color as me. What is your favorite food?
Ooh. I would say, I mean, that moves around a bit, but in the last year, my favorite food has been broccoli, turmeric tempura broccoli. We have this store near us that has like a hot food bar, and they lightly batter broccoli in this turmeric tempura, and I can't get enough of it. Although I'm kind of a bit sick of it now because I've eaten too much of it for like a year and a half. So it's losing its shine, but that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I've been on a broccoli and cheese kick a lot
Oh yeah,
lately.
I
Yeah.
love cheese. Like my deathbed meal would be just bring me something with a load of melted cheese.
Absolutely. That's great. What is your favorite place that you visited on Earth that you can simply just enjoy the beauty around you for, the nature?
Gosh. You know, I could probably give you 6 places. I have to say, we live in the Santa Monica Mountains in California, and I'm pretty entranced by where we live. But because it's very remote, and you know, we're kind of in the wilderness. But the first place that comes to mind is Iona. So Iona is a small island. It's 3 miles by 1.5 miles, and it's off the Isle of Mull in Scotland. And it's a spiritual home for me. I first went there when I was 23, and I had one of my first past life visionary experiences there. And it's a place I've been to about 5 times. It's a place I'm dying to take Stephen. It's like going back in time, and they have a very famous abbey and the ruins of a nunnery there. So it's a very spiritually connected place, Iona, in Scotland.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I've never heard of that one. That's beautiful. Thank you. You're a music guy. So this one, you know, I either get a quick answer or you have to dig around because you like so much music. But what is your favorite artist and or song and or both?
Ooh, gosh. Yeah, it's hard for me to pick one. That's a bit like saying who's your favorite best friend. Like, you know what I mean? So I could list you 10. I could say Kate Bush, Tori Amos, Sufjan Stevens. My recent someone I've been playing a lot lately, who I've loved for many years, and I just got to see him live at the Greek Theatre. A modern classical composer called Ludovico Einaudi. He just plays piano in the most incredible way. And you probably have heard some of his music in a movie or on an advert, so Ludovico comes to mind right now. But I love so many, and honestly, I think the only kind of music I don't really vibe with is when it's too techno or too heavy metal. Like, I don't really like too much noise in my music. So long as there's some melody, I'm good. But if it's just noise music, that to me is not the kind of music I like.
Yeah, it can take you out of that zone for sure. I
Yeah,
know
but
what
I
you're
have
talking about.
friends who heavy metal is their healing, and I totally get it. Like, I think that's why we have so many genres of music. Heavy metal for them expresses something in their body. I've tried. I like rock when it's got a good melody, but again, for me, it all comes back to melody.
Yeah, a lot of things, something a lot of people didn't know about me until I shared it more. I like gangster rap, hardcore
Oh,
90s and 2000s gangster rap. I grew up with it.
very cool.
Yeah, it's just something that I listen to still. Um, and Ween, of course. Ween's my favorite. But have I ever introduced you to Ween?
No, I've never even heard of
Oh
Ween.
God. Okay, I'll text you that later.
Okay.
Um, let's see. Last question. Let's make it a fun one. What's your favorite childhood memory?
Wow. God, my favorite childhood memory. Well, this is a weird one because does it count if you were 15 and a half?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
My mum and my dad brought me to America for the first time to go to Orlando, to go to Disney World, and to go to Universal Studios. Now, remember, film was like one of my safe places. So you can imagine how this 15-and-a-half-year-old who never knew if I'd get to America or, Disney World was a very expensive holiday. It was something that not everybody in England got to go to because, it's the flights and all of that. So when they could afford to, they took me and my sister and her then boyfriend came for the first week. And I have so many beautiful memories of that 2 weeks with my mom and dad. And American friends laugh at me because I fondly remember Sizzler, which I now understand is not considered high cuisine in America. But to a 15-and-a-half-year-old, a Sizzler buffet was like, oh my God, me and my mom, and of course, my dad, we were on a budget. So my dad's trying to feed us all on a budget, I guess. I just remember being completely entranced, and we were driving to the what's it called, the kind of the space center near there, I forget the name.
Oh yeah, Epcot Center.
Yeah, well, was it, or is it Cape Canaveral, or
Oh yeah, Cape Canaveral in
I think,
Florida. Yeah, Cape Cod, Cape
yeah,
Canaveral, one of the
I,
two. Yeah.
I think I remember us driving. Enya Shepherd's Moons was an album I had at the time that I loved. So I remember we're in this rented car. Enya Shepherd Moon's album is on. I'm sat in the back. My parents are in the front. There's a massive thunderstorm, the likes of which we never saw in England. And we're driving away from the space centers, the Kennedy Center or the Cape Canaveral. I can't remember the name, but I just was like, where are we? Like, it just felt unreal to me as a 15-and-a-half-year-old. And it remains one of my special memories with my parents. And it's ironic that I ended up living in America.
It is. Things work out that way too, and I know America being such a big place too to drive across and whatnot from coming from England or Europe or whatever. So it definitely.
You can fit the whole of England into Colorado, and you've still got Colorado left. So someone explained that to me when I first moved to America. I lived in Boulder, Colorado, which I loved for the first 3 years, and that really put it in perspective. But yeah, the land of America captured me and captivated me at 15 and a half. And then when I started coming here to do seminars in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, I was equally captivated, and I'm still captivated by the land here. I think, the land that you guys grew up on is extraordinary, just extraordinary, and the diversity of nature here, to someone who came from a relatively small island that you can fit into Colorado, it's mind blowing.
It is a beautiful place, and one day, if you ever make it to Michigan, I'll show you the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and Lake Superior. It's by
Oh,
far my favorite place in the world, and
I've heard,
well,
I've heard that it's supposed to be beautiful. Yes, that would be
yeah,
lovely.
that'd be great. So, let's people who either haven't heard of you or don't know, anything but how to type your name into YouTube, where to find you, where can they find all of your information about the portal, your videos, your monthly updates, your book? We've got links down below too for the book, for your website and your YouTube, but where can they find you?
Thanks, Rob. So yeah, leeharrisenergy.com. My channel on YouTube you can find through the website leeharrisenergy.com, but my channel on YouTube is Lee Harris Energy, and we put the music on leeharrismusic.com. And yeah, you'll find on the website there's lots and lots of free content. I also have a podcast called Impact the World, which, Rob, you were a fantastic guest on in season 1. And there are
Thank you.
150 episodes of that now. We're taking a hiatus for a couple of months before we come back with season 2. So there's lots and lots of free content you can get involved in. But if Own Your Value appeals to you, it will be available for a few more weeks. So would love to have you join us in there. And the portal is my monthly members community. And yeah, thank you for having me on and for letting me share about the book. We're excited about the book, and that's on Amazon and all the places that you can get books and audiobooks.
Absolutely, brother. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you. Like I've said, you're legitimately one of the kindest hearted, nicest people in the world I've ever met. You love what you do, and you do what you love so beautifully. And thank you for coming on and sharing your experience and going through the crazy questions of what color you like and all that good
I
stuff.
loved it. That was great.
Well, maybe sometime further down the trough, we'll have you back on and share some other colors that you like.
Oh, yeah, I'll have to think of some new ones.
All right. Well, thank you so much, brother. I love you. I appreciate
Thank
you
you. I
coming
love you
here.
too, and love to Kalina.
I will send that to her. And thanks again for being on. Thank you, everyone who came today to watch. And even though this wasn't live, we appreciate everyone's participation in the chat. Come back next week where we will be live, and we will have the most special of special guest, Kalina Angel. Amazing channeler, amazing intuitive, amazing hearted woman who is the pinnacle of my own life and my children's life. She is an amazing human being, and you need to know her more, because I think that if you love me, you're going to love her. And if you don't know her already, which most of you do, you'll really get to know her this time. And even for those of you who've known her for years, we're going to be getting into the deep topics of life, love, American fashion. Wherever the conversation takes us, we will go. So join us next week, guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everyone who gives their support, who participates in the comment section, who gives donations. We appreciate all of that. We love you guys. Thanks again. We'll see some of you on the 24th for the channeling class. The rest of you we'll see every Wednesday here or any other time we're uploading our channeling videos for the ET Whisperer. Love you guys so much. Thank you, and we'll see you next week on the other side.